my next team, my first team in our most interesting of the offseason, Houston Rockets. We'll stay in the West. We'll stay in the can they take a step forward group, kind of in the middle of the Western Conference. Picks 3 and 44 in the draft. I think obviously 3 being the real way that they're going to work their way into the headlines and news cycle here to start things off West. But also Alperen Şengün eligible for an extension. You have Fred VanVleet basically already expiring if they want him to be. He has that team option on the last year of his contract. So, when you hear Reed Shepherd being named as a potential target at 3 and things, I know that seems odd, but they're already kind of having to plan for, is VanVleet going to be on our team beyond that? Could we decline the option and give him an extension at less money? Like, what's the whole situation going to be? They're also being connected with Donovan Clingan a lot, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and that's part of why they've just kind of been on my mind. Is I'm like, would they after the Steven Adams thing that they do? They allegedly wanted Brook Lopez. Now they're targeting Clingan. I'm not fully following what their plan is there. It feels like that would just be sort of creating a logjam by choice, but maybe they just really want that 1 through 48 minutes. We're going to have a center. We're going to have defense. I don't know. But of course, layered on top of all of that is they were the most desperate, aggressive team last offseason. Do they still feel that level of pressure? And are they one of the surprise teams that tries to go out and get a massive improvement on the trade market and really be a surprise player in the sweepstakes for any of these stars that were kind of, maybe they will, maybe they won't be available? And I think more than anyone else, I'll just say it, like Jimmy Butler has the connection there. I'm not saying they're going to be the best trade partner for the Heat, but that's kind of where my mind goes, is if they really want to get involved in something like that, they obviously have the assets to do it, and I wouldn't be surprised given how much we know Tillman Fertitta has pushed since they lost Harden.
I love the Houston Rockets as the most interesting team of the offseason because there's real team building strategy things here, right? Like, how do you build around Alperen Şengün? Can he really be your Nikola Jokic and all these things, the way that they're talking about him? You've got so many interesting young players, from Jalen Green to Jabari Smith Jr. to Tari Eason, the Thompsons, all these guys that you've got coming off the bench, and Cam Whitmore, all these interesting players. Where do you fit them in? You've got the Dylan Brooks and the Fred VanVleet veteran factors on the roster already. You've got really chunky tradable contracts, even from like a Jock Landale and a Jeff Green and these other guys that are on the roster. It's like, well, we can kind of move these things and turn it into something. You've got the number 3 pick in this draft. From all the team building asset stuff, like, their whole world is open. And yet, obviously, the smartest thing to do would be to just take somebody at number 3, take another bite at the apple, keep building around all these great, talented young players that we all like, and just chill. And yet you've got this ownership edict saying, we're not chilling, we're going for it. The hell with the future. We need to make the playoffs right now for some weird reason. And the number one job for an executive, for a front office executive, a general manager in charge of building a roster, is not to build a championship roster. That's not the number one job. The number one job for all these guys is to keep the job. And if you want to keep your job, you better make your owner happy. And so all these things that we think that they should do, they might just not do it because the guy that's in charge of it is just trying to keep his job, because there is this immense amount of pressure from your boss to make the playoffs. And so they're so interesting for so many different reasons. And what kind of star do they go out and get? I have been making the Jimmy Butler connection forever. It is so easy. Jimmy Butler from Houston would get along with Ime Udoka a ton. Would like a lot of the veteran players on that roster. Makes a lot of sense from just frankly what they need on that team too. Do they go out and do it? Because they have all the things that they would need. They have not even just one package. They have several versions of several different packages that they could offer Miami. And if the Heat made the decision eventually to just say, you know what, we can't give Jimmy Butler that much money. The Houston Rockets are desperate enough to do it. They're fine with it. We can't credibly do it and feel good about it. So we're going to have to explore some trades. Whether it's Philadelphia that's offering 3 first-round picks and the cap flexibility, whether it's maybe it's the Warriors who have been rumored with like a Kuminga-based package and some picks or whatever it is. Houston could beat every one of those packages like with one hand tied behind their back. And if they really wanted to make that move, they could. And so that it feels like a realistic option for them if, again, the Heat end up kind of coming to this crossroads. Besides Jimmy Butler, I don't really know what the other star is for them. Like a Brandon Ingram doesn't make sense for them. They want that guy that's really going to take them up that notch. And Brandon Ingram might be more of he's not like a ceiling raiser at all, or even a floor raiser. It feels like Jimmy Butler could be that player, but I don't really know who else that player would be.
Yeah, a lot of the other guys seem to be guards, right? So they probably don't need that. At least not, if Mitchell's not available, they don't need a point guard, I should say. If Van Vliet was solid, he makes a lot of sense with Şengün. It felt like he really was a culture setter and got along with Udoka as well. And they've just paid him. They're not going to want to replace him or trade him away. So yeah, part of it is we're not exactly positive who all could end up being available throughout all this, but I don't know, like, would it be insane if they had a conversation on a sign and trade with the Clippers for Paul George? I don't know. Like that's sort of why I brought them up, is they just feel like such a wild card, given that they were just so over the top with everything last summer, and we kind of just seem to have forgotten about them a little bit. But I honestly love, Wes, that we started with these two teams. I think these are the two teams, they were basically eliminated by the time you started doing the podcast, but that I am over the moon in love with, that Chris has never bought in on. So the fact that we're able to start with New Orleans and Houston just warms my heart. I'm a fervent believer in Alperen Şengün. I had him as an all-star last year when we did our all-star picks. I feel like his defense is much better than, not much, it's better than the Jokic or the Sabonis comps that he gets. I think he actually has the ability to kind of move his feet and protect the rim at a little bit of a higher level than those guys do, especially considering he's younger than them, of course. So I just think this team is, plus they unlocked some small ball stuff when when he got hurt and Jabari Smith was playing center, and it just feels like they have all the talent that they need. They're ready to make a run, I feel like. Yeah, ask me.
So us being two really big Houston Rockets fans here, obviously. The whole small ball thing was interesting. When Şengün got hurt at the end of the year, and they've got Jalen Green with Jabari Smith at center, and Jalen Green really flourished. And it feels like there should be a version where Jalen Green and Şengün are the next Jamal Murray Jokic, like that they could work out this 2-man game partnership. But it's never been there, even like really a little bit. And they do tend to play better when the other one's not on the court. And it's still too early to me. I'd rather be late on this stuff than early, but I would give it another chance. I wouldn't be like rushing to get off of Jalen Green, but all the reporting around Houston was even at the deadline that Jalen Green could be more available than people thought. And so I think if you had to pick one, it's obviously Şengün. But in terms of just like the vision of where the team should be going, like what do you think the Houston Rockets should be doing? Because I guess to answer my own question before I even let you answer it, I thought the fact everybody kind of looked at are they actually better with Jabari Smith at center over Şengün? Is that really the future? And I'm like, that's more of like that was to me a great development is, now we just know how we want to play when Şengün's not on the court. Like maybe you don't need a traditional backup center. Maybe it's like,
but they seem to think they do, which is also what complicates it, because they've been so determined to get another center on the roster.
Unless the whole Kleen stuff is a smokescreen to get somebody to try to trade up.
But they very much for sure had an offer on the table for Brook Lopez, and he just wanted to go back to Milwaukee. So I don't fully get it.
To them maybe not seeing how ready Şengün was. That was like maybe Şengün just needs a year to kind of get groomed, and maybe having Brook Lopez in front of him is insurance in that. It would be interesting to see because if Brook Lopez is available this year, if they kind of circle back on that Brook Lopez idea, that would be weird. I'm hoping that they don't. I hope they realize that Şengün's just fine at center and they don't need that. So, but who knows?
To answer your question, I mean, I think that the Rockets, it kind of feels like they have what they need, to be honest with you. Like, I guess Jabari Smith to me is a little bit of an interesting part of this, because he really is sort of like similar to what we were talking about with Zion. I think Jabari is a wing who happens to be really tall. Mm-hmm. So he's not exactly this sort of secondary rim protector that you're going to put next to Şengün and have that kind of, Aaron Gordon to your Jokic per se. I feel like he is, and even Aaron Gordon's not exactly that, but, like if they could have Draymond Green next to Şengün, that would be perfect, but it's not that. So that's the part where it gets a little bit complicated, is like, how do you kind of piece together you have a lot of wing talent, you have a lot of defensive, I think, potential in your perimeter players, but how do you sort of meld that with the limitations that, of course, Şengün is always going to have? That's kind of, I think, the question. But having a coach like Udoka to help do that is obviously great. I could see I understand the idea of if you can get Şengün to maybe take more threes, to be a dribble handoff facilitator, things like that. To have another big option, it's not the craziest. I guess just with Klingon, it's like if he has his eyes on potentially going first overall, and he goes from that to I'm backing up an all-star, that feels like you're just asking for some problems for two guys who have a lot of pride and everything. But I love Cam Whitmore. I love Amen Thompson. I think that shooting would be the only other thing to mention here. They need, and that's maybe where Jimmy doesn't make a ton of sense. It's interesting because Philly and Houston are two places he might end up that don't have an absolute ton of shooting to help him out or to maximize what you want for Butler. So that would be something to figure out. Fred VanVleet, again, going to a team where he's the only guy who's a high-volume shooter, just destined to just be launching threes off the bounce and being the only modern player on his team, so to speak. But yeah, I think the Rockets are going to do something. If nothing else, they'll have the 3rd overall pick, but I think they're going to do more. And they also have some other, Jayshawn Tate's a free agent. They have some other kind of interesting decisions too that could be ripple effects. So there we go.